The continent of Elindra had always worshipped power. From the moment a child was born, their future was decided by a single measurement: mana potential. In this world, magic wasn't just a tool. It was the foundation of society itself. Kings ruled with magic. Armies conquered with magic. And the most powerful mages became legends whose names were etched into the history of the world. And if someone had no magic, then they were nothing. At the heart of this world stood the most prestigious magical institution ever created: Etherian Magic Academy. A massive floating citadel built atop ancient ruins older than recorded history. Towering marble pillars stretched into the sky, arcane circles glowed across its stone courtyards, and the sound of spellcasting echoed through the air from dawn until nightfall. Every year, the most talented young mages from across the continent gathered here. The prodigies. The nobles. The future rulers of magic itself. But among these rising stars, there existed a boy who should never have been allowed inside these gates. His name was Kale Virion. And he was the Academy's greatest embarrassment. The massive arena of Etherian roared with excitement as hundreds of students filled the stone stands. Today was one of the most important days of the semester. The Combat Potential Evaluation. This was where students proved their worth. One by one, they would step into the arena, activate the Academy's mana-measuring artifact, and demonstrate their magical capabilities in combat. The results would determine their official ranking for the year. And rankings meant everything. High-ranked students received better training, better resources, and the chance to enter elite mage divisions. Low-ranked students, well, they barely survived the Academy at all. At the center of the arena stood a massive glowing crystal known as the Ether Core. It was an ancient relic that could measure a mage's mana capacity with perfect accuracy. And today, it was about to expose someone once again. A tall instructor stepped forward, his voice echoing through the arena. Next student. Kale Virion. Immediately, laughter erupted from the stands. Wait, he's still here. I thought that trash dropped out already. Why even test him? His mana score was literally 0. 0. That's generous. Some students laughed. Others shook their heads in disappointment. And a few simply looked bored. Because everyone already knew what was about to happen. At the edge of the arena, Kale slowly stepped forward. His academy uniform looked slightly worn compared to the pristine robes of the noble students around him. His dark hair fell over tired eyes that had clearly endured years of humiliation. But despite the whispers, despite the mocking laughter, he walked forward without lowering his head. Inside his chest, Kale felt the familiar tightening of his stomach. Not fear. Just exhaustion. Here we go again. When Kale first entered the academy 3 years ago, there had been hope. Hope that he might awaken magic. Hope that the tests were wrong. Hope that things would change. But they never did. 3 years. 3 years of testing. 3 years of humiliation. And the result was always the same. Mana capacity, near 0. A result so pathetic that the Academy had created an entirely new ranking category just to label him. Trash class. The lowest rank in the Academy's entire history. Even servants sometimes had more mana than that. Kale stepped onto the circular platform beneath the Ether Core. The giant crystal hummed as it began analyzing him. Golden lines of magical energy scanned his body. The arena slowly quieted. Even if everyone knew the outcome, the artifact never lied. A moment later, a glowing number appeared above the crystal. Mana capacity, 0.02. The entire arena erupted in laughter. Ha ha ha. 0.02. That's worse than last year. I've seen stray dogs with more mana than that. Why is he even allowed to stay here? Even some professors on the observation platform exchanged disappointed looks. One of them sighed. That boy again, why hasn't he dropped out yet? Stubbornness, I suppose. Kale stood silently beneath the crystal as the glowing number hovered above him like a permanent mark of shame. He had seen it so many times that it barely hurt anymore. Almost. The instructor cleared his throat. Mana capacity confirmed. Trash class ranking maintained. Then he gestured toward the arena. Proceed to combat demonstration. Kale clenched his fists slightly. This was always the worst part. Because while mana capacity measured potential, combat demonstrated reality. And in a place like Etherean Academy, reality was brutal. The instructor glanced toward the stands. Volunteer opponent. A hand shot up immediately. A tall boy with neatly styled silver hair stepped forward. His uniform bore the insignia of a noble family. Lucian Hargrave. Ranked B class, already considered extremely talented among first-year students. Lucian walked into the arena with a confident smile. Well, this should be easy. The crowd chuckled. Kale exhaled slowly. Just get through it. Lucian raised his hand. Blue mana gathered instantly around his fingers. A swirling wind spell formed, whipping dust across the arena floor. Try not to cry when this ends, Lucian said smugly. The instructor raised his hand. Begin. The moment the signal was given, Lucian attacked. A blast of compressed wind shot forward like a cannon. Kale tried to move. But without mana enhancement, his body was slower than any trained mage. The attack slammed into him instantly. Boom. Kale was thrown across the arena floor, skidding violently across the stone. Gasps echoed through the crowd. But not from concern. From amusement. Wow, that was fast. He didn't even cast a spell. Lucian walked forward casually. Kale struggled to push himself up. His ribs burned. His vision swam slightly. But he forced himself to stand. Lucian raised an eyebrow. You're still standing. Kale didn't answer. Lucian sighed dramatically. Fine. Mana gathered around his hand again. This time forming sharp blades of compressed wind. Let's end this. The attack launched. 3 wind blades sliced across the arena. Kale tried to dodge. But the moment he moved, the first blade slammed into him. Then the second. Then the third. His body crashed into the arena wall. The impact echoed loudly. Kale collapsed to one knee. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. The instructor raised his hand. Match concluded. Lucian turned away casually. Pathetic. The crowd applauded lightly. Another humiliating defeat. Just another day for Kale Virion. 2 academy guards dragged Kale out of the arena shortly afterward. One of them shook his head. You should really quit, kid. Why keep embarrassing yourself? Kale said nothing. Because the truth was something no one here would understand. Late that evening, the academy grounds had grown quiet. Most students were celebrating their ranking results. But Kale stood alone in a crumbling section of the academy known as the Old Ruins Wing. This part of Etherean had been abandoned for decades. Collapsed walls. Broken pillars. Dust-covered hallways. And unfortunately for Kale, this was where punishment duty happened. A senior instructor tossed him a rusted broom. Clean the debris before morning. Kale nodded silently. The instructor scoffed. Maybe physical labor suits someone like you better than magic. Then he walked away. Leaving Kale alone in the darkness. Kale began sweeping slowly. Dust filled the air as he moved broken stones aside. His body still ached from the fight earlier. Every movement hurt. But he kept working. Because quitting was never an option. As the night deepened, the academy grew silent. Moonlight filtered through the broken ceiling of the ruins. Kale wiped sweat from his forehead. Then he muttered quietly to himself. Just a little longer, because deep inside his mind, a memory appeared. A warm voice. A gentle hand resting on his head. Kale, promise me something. His mother's voice. Soft. Fading. But unforgettable. Never give up on your magic. Even if the world says you're worthless. Kale tightened his grip on the broom. I promised you. I won't quit. Even if the entire world mocked him. Even if the academy treated him like garbage. Even if he never awakened magic, he would stay. Because his mother believed in him. And that was enough. As Kale moved a pile of broken stones aside, something strange happened. Clink. His broom hit something metallic beneath the rubble. Kale frowned. That's odd. He knelt down and began brushing away the dirt. Slowly. A circular stone plate appeared beneath the rubble. Ancient symbols covered its surface. Runes unlike anything taught at the academy. Kale tilted his head. I've never seen these before. The moment his fingers brushed against the center of the plate, the entire ruin trembled. A deep humming sound echoed through the ground. Kale's eyes widened. Wait, suddenly, the runes ignited with blinding crimson light. Boom. The stone plate cracked open. A hidden chamber beneath the ruins revealed itself. Kale stumbled backward. Dust exploded into the air. What the? Before he could react, a beam of red light shot upward from the chamber and struck him directly in the chest. His body froze. Pain surged through every nerve in his body. Ack! Images flooded his mind. Ancient battles. Falling civilizations. Endless darkness swallowing entire worlds. Then, a voice echoed inside his head. Cold. Ancient. Mechanical. Compatibility confirmed. Kale gasped. What? The voice continued. Host identified. Initializing Abyssal Archive System. Suddenly, a glowing screen appeared before his eyes. No one else was there to see it. But Kale stared in disbelief as strange symbols formed in the air. System activated host, Kale Virion Mana Classification, unknown status, unregistered anomaly. Kale's breathing became shallow. System. The voice spoke again. Primary ability unlocked. Mana Devour, Level 1, the glowing interface pulsed softly in the darkness. Kale slowly reached toward it. But his hand passed straight through the light. What is this? The ruins were silent. The academy above slept peacefully. Completely unaware that something impossible had just awakened beneath their feet. And Kale Virion, the weakest student in Etherian Magic Academy, had just triggered a power that should have never existed. The birth of the academy's hidden monster had begun. The crimson light slowly faded from the ruined chamber beneath Etherian Magic Academy, leaving the air thick with dust and silence. Broken stone fragments still trembled across the ground as Kale Virion remained frozen in place, his breathing uneven and shallow. The world around him felt distant, as if reality itself had paused for a moment. But the glowing interface floating before his eyes was unmistakably real. A thin panel of translucent light hovered in the air, shimmering softly like a reflection on water. Strange symbols and characters moved across it, shifting and reorganizing themselves as if responding to his thoughts. Kale blinked. Then blinked again. What is this? No one answered. Above him, far beyond the cracked ruins, the academy grounds were quiet. Students slept peacefully in their dormitories, unaware that something impossible had just awakened beneath their feet. But inside Kale's mind, a cold mechanical voice spoke again. Abyssal Archive System successfully activated. Kale's heartbeat quickened. He looked around nervously, half expecting someone to appear. Who said that? The voice came again, emotionless and ancient. System bound to host, Kale Virion. The glowing panel shifted. New lines of information appeared. Host name, Kale Virion. Mana classification, unknown current status, unregistered anomaly. Primary ability, Mana Devour, Level 1, secondary function, spell analysis. Energy source. Sealed abyssal mana. Kale stared at the words. A system. His voice trembled slightly. Systems didn't exist. Not in this world. Magic in Alindra followed strict laws. Spells required incantations, runic circles, and a mage's internal mana core to function. Everything was governed by centuries of magical research and structure. There was no such thing as floating interfaces or mysterious systems. Those were stories from ancient myths. Artifacts lost during the Age of Cataclysm. Yet here it was. Directly in front of him. Kale slowly reached out toward the panel again. This time, the moment his fingers passed through the light, the interface reacted. The text shifted. User input detected. Kale immediately pulled his hand back. It responded. His chest tightened. For years, the Academy had labeled him worthless. A failure who possessed almost no mana capacity at all. And yet, this strange system was connected directly to him. The mechanical voice continued. Host possesses dormant energy type, abyssal mana. The words lingered in the air. Kale frowned. Abyssal mana. He had never heard of such a thing. The Academy taught many magical classifications. Elemental mana, spirit mana, celestial mana, and even forbidden curse mana used by dark mages. But abyssal mana? That term didn't exist in modern magic. The system responded immediately. Abyssal mana, primordial energy originating from pre-civilization magical ecosystems. Classification, highly unstable. Extremely destructive. Status, sealed since birth. Kale's eyes widened. Sealed. The panel shifted again. Seal integrity compromised during relic activation. Warning, host body undergoing adaptation. A strange sensation suddenly pulsed through Kale's chest. It wasn't pain. But it felt different. For as long as he could remember, his body had always felt hollow. Whenever other students described the feeling of mana flowing through their veins, Kale had never understood it. His mana core had always been empty. Like a dry well. But now, something deep inside him stirred. A faint pressure began building in the center of his chest. It felt cold. Heavy. Like a quiet ocean hidden beneath his ribs. Kale's breath caught. Is this mana? The system answered. Correction, abyssal mana. The glowing interface expanded. New information appeared. Unique skill unlocked. Mana Devour allows host to absorb and consume external mana sources. Consumed mana strengthens abyssal core. Ability evolves through combat experience. Kale's mind struggled to process what he was reading. Absorb mana. That wasn't normal. Mages generated mana internally through their cores. Even advanced techniques like mana siphoning required complex spells. But this ability. It sounded far more dangerous. Before Kale could think further, the system displayed another function. Secondary ability, spell analysis. Host can observe, dissect, and understand magical structures instantly. Analyzed spells may be adapted into abyssal-compatible techniques. Kale swallowed. That's impossible. Spells took years to master. Students spent entire semesters learning just one intermediate spell. Yet this system was telling him he could simply analyze them. The mechanical voice spoke again. System evaluation complete. Host classification updated. The words shifted dramatically. The previous academy rank vanished. And a new title appeared. Rank, unclassified anomaly. Kale stared silently. Anomaly, at Etherean Magic Academy, students were categorized carefully. S-class. A-class. B-class. All the way down to the humiliating trash class. But this rank didn't belong anywhere. It meant something outside the Academy's understanding. Something the world itself couldn't categorize. Kale slowly stood up. The glowing interface hovered calmly in front of him. His heart raced with a strange mixture of fear and excitement. For the first time in his life, something in the world had acknowledged him. Not as worthless. Not as trash. But as something unknown. He looked at his hands. Mana Devour. The system waited silently. Kale hesitated. Then whispered quietly. Show me how it works. The interface flickered. Training mode recommended. The ground beneath him vibrated softly. From the open chamber below, a faint crimson glow pulsed deeper underground. But the system displayed a new prompt. Low-risk mana sources detected within Academy training zones. Kale blinked. Training zones. Of course. The Academy had numerous practice areas scattered throughout the campus. Some were used for beginner spell practice, while others contained enchanted constructs for combat training. And many of those zones were empty at night. Which meant no witnesses. Kale glanced toward the staircase leading back to the surface. If someone discovered him here, things would become complicated. But the thought of testing this power, it burned inside his chest. For the first time in years, Kale felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. He climbed out of the ruined chamber and quietly made his way through the abandoned wing of the academy. The corridors were dark and silent. Moonlight filtered through broken windows as he stepped carefully across the stone floors. Eventually, Kale reached one of the academy's lesser-used training courtyards. Tall stone walls surrounded the area, and several dormant practice constructs stood silently in the center of the field. Training golems. Magical constructs built to simulate real combat. Most students avoided these particular ones, because these were designed for upper-class mages. Even a B-class student would struggle against them. Kale stood at the edge of the courtyard. If I break one of these, I'll definitely get expelled. The system responded. Recommended target detected. One of the golems slowly activated. Its stone body shifted as glowing mana lines spread across its surface. The construct stood nearly 3 meters tall. Runic circles rotated across its chest. A standard academy combat unit, designed to test advanced spellcasters. Kale swallowed nervously. This is definitely a bad idea. But the faint pressure in his chest pulsed again. That cold ocean of energy. Waiting. The golem's eyes lit up. A mechanical voice echoed from within it. Training target detected. Engaging combat protocol. The construct stepped forward. Heavy stone feet slammed against the courtyard floor. Kale immediately panicked. Wait. The golem swung its massive arm. Kale barely dodged as the fist smashed into the ground beside him. Crash. Stone shattered across the courtyard. Kale stumbled backward. Okay, definitely a bad idea. The golem attacked again. Another crushing strike. Kale ducked under the attack, his heart pounding wildly. I can't fight this thing. The system responded instantly. Mana Devour activation recommended. Kale froze for a split second. How? Focus on target mana source. The golem's chest glowed brightly. Its mana core pulsed at the center of its body. Kale focused on it. The moment he did, something inside his chest reacted. The cold pressure surged outward. A dark ripple spread through the air. The golem suddenly froze mid-motion. Its glowing runes flickered. Then, a stream of blue mana began flowing out of the construct's body. Like smoke being pulled by invisible gravity. The energy rushed toward Kale. Straight into his chest. Kale gasped. The sensation was overwhelming. Mana flooded through his body like a rushing river. Power surged through every nerve. What is happening? The system responded calmly. Mana Devour successful. The golem's movements became slower. Weaker. Cracks began spreading across its stone body. Kale stared in disbelief as more mana poured into him. He could feel it. Feel it strengthening that strange abyss inside his chest. The golem raised its arm one final time. But before it could strike, crack. Its entire body shattered. Stone fragments exploded across the courtyard. The massive construct collapsed into rubble. Silence returned. Kale stood frozen in the center of the field. His breathing shaky. His heart racing. I destroyed it. The system confirmed. Target mana source consumed. Abyssal core energy increased. Kale slowly looked down at his hands. He hadn't cast a spell. Hadn't used a weapon. Yet he had just destroyed a senior training golem. Something even B-class students struggled against. A nervous laugh escaped his lips. If the professors see this, he'd definitely be expelled. No question. But the realization that followed sent chills down his spine. This power was terrifying. And he had used it completely by accident. The system flickered again. Host growth potential, unlimited. The words glowed softly. Kale stared at them. Unlimited. The academy had always told him his potential was zero. That he could never grow stronger. That his future was worthless. But now, something inside him was proving them wrong. Kale clenched his fists slowly. No. He shook his head. I can't let anyone know about this. If the academy discovered a power like this, they wouldn't praise him. They'd fear him. And things feared by powerful mages rarely survived. Kale looked at the destroyed golem. Then toward the silent academy buildings beyond the courtyard. From tomorrow onward, nothing could change on the surface. He would still be the trash class student everyone mocked. The weakest mage in Etherian Academy. But in the shadows, everything had changed. Kale Virion had taken his first step into something far beyond ordinary magic. And deep inside his chest, the abyss had begun to awaken. The nights at Etherian Magic Academy were supposed to be peaceful. After sunset, the sprawling towers of marble and floating bridges slowly fell silent. The torches along the corridors dimmed, enchanted barriers sealed off the restricted zones, and the thousands of students who dreamed of becoming great mages retreated to their dormitories. For most students, night meant rest. But for one particular student, night had become the beginning of something far more dangerous. Deep beneath the academy grounds, far below the lecture halls and training arenas, a hidden world existed that very few people even knew about. The Shadow Grounds. A labyrinth of ancient ruins buried under the academy since before its founding. Old corridors of cracked stone stretched endlessly beneath the earth, lit only by faint glowing runes left behind by long-dead archmages. These ruins were sealed off centuries ago. Not because they were useless, but because they were too dangerous. And yet tonight, a single figure walked quietly through one of those forgotten corridors. Kale Virion. The academy's lowest-ranked student. The so-called trash class mage. But the faint crimson glow pulsing behind his eyes told a very different story. Soft footsteps echoed through the underground hall as Kale cautiously moved forward. Dust shifted under his boots while ancient symbols carved into the walls flickered faintly, reacting to the presence of mana in the air. Floating in front of him was the translucent interface only he could see. The Abyssal Archive System. It hovered silently as lines of glowing text shifted across its surface. Current location, subterranean zone, shadow grounds danger level, moderate recommended training area. Kale exhaled slowly. So this place has always been under the academy. The system did not answer directly, but the interface displayed a map. A complicated network of tunnels spread across the underground layer like veins beneath the academy. Sections were marked with warnings. Others with faint glowing indicators. Training zones. Trial chambers. Mana anomalies. Kale swallowed slightly. A few nights had passed since he accidentally awakened the relic beneath the abandoned ruins. Since then, he had spent every evening exploring deeper underground, following the guidance of the mysterious system. And the deeper he went, the stranger things became. Because these ruins weren't just empty tunnels. They were training grounds. Training grounds left behind by mages so powerful that modern magic theory barely understood their techniques. Kale stopped walking as the corridor opened into a massive circular chamber. Stone pillars surrounded the area, each carved with complex arcane inscriptions that pulsed faintly with dormant energy. The system immediately reacted. Trial chamber detected combat simulation trial, Tier 1. Kale rubbed the back of his neck. Combat trial. He had already faced one golem earlier that week. The memory still made his chest tighten. Back then, he had barely understood how his new power worked. Now, things were different. Not completely under control. But better. The pressure inside his chest, that cold abyss of energy, had grown slightly stronger with each passing night. The system's words echoed quietly in his mind. Abyssal mana. A forbidden energy sealed inside him since birth. An energy that devoured mana itself. Kale took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the chamber. The moment his foot crossed the circular runic boundary, the entire room reacted. The ancient runes carved into the floor ignited. Crimson light surged through the chamber. Then, a low growl echoed from the darkness. Kale's eyes widened. That doesn't sound like a golem. Something moved behind one of the pillars. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Predatory. Then it emerged. A creature formed entirely from condensed mana. Its body resembled a massive wolf, but its fur was made of flickering blue magical flames. Jagged runic symbols crawled across its limbs like living tattoos. A mana beast. Kale felt a chill run down his spine. Wait, the Academy keeps these things down here. The system responded calmly. Trial entity, mana beast, rank C purpose, combat adaptation training. The beast snarled. Blue mana sparks burst from its jaws as it crouched low, preparing to attack. Kale instinctively stepped backward. C-rank monsters were no joke. Most Academy students wouldn't even be allowed to face something like this until their second year. And Kale officially had almost zero mana. The beast lunged. Its speed was terrifying. Kale barely dodged as the creature slammed into the ground where he had been standing. Stone shattered. Dust exploded into the air. Okay. Kale rolled across the floor and scrambled to his feet. This is insane. The beast turned instantly. It attacked again. Claws of condensed mana sliced through the air. Kale ducked under the strike, but the sheer force of the attack sent a shockwave across the chamber. His heart pounded. He could feel it clearly now. The beast's mana core. Pulsing inside its chest like a blazing star. The system's words flashed in front of his eyes. Mana devour. Kale clenched his teeth. All right, let's try this again. He focused on the creature's mana. The moment he did, the cold abyss inside his chest responded. A dark ripple spread outward. The beast froze mid-attack. Its glowing body flickered violently. Then, streams of blue mana began tearing themselves away from the creature's form. They rushed through the air. Straight toward Kale. The energy slammed into his chest. A rush of power exploded through his body. His muscles tensed. His vision sharpened. Every nerve screamed with sensation. The beast howled as its body began destabilizing. Cracks of dark energy spread across its form. Kale's eyes widened. It's working. But the beast wasn't finished yet. With a final desperate roar, it charged forward one last time. Kale instinctively raised his hand. Something strange happened. The abyss inside him pulsed violently. Dark energy burst outward from his palm. Boom. A shockwave exploded through the chamber. The beast's body shattered into fragments of dissolving mana. Silence followed. Kale stood frozen. His hand still raised. What was that? The system immediately responded. New skill acquired. Abyssal Pulse, level 1. Kale blinked. A skill. The interface expanded. Abyssal Pulse releases concentrated abyssal mana in a short-range shockwave. Effective against mana-based entities. Kale slowly lowered his hand. I just created a skill. Most mages spent years studying ancient tomes just to learn a single advanced spell. Yet somehow, his body had simply invented one during combat. The system quietly added another message. Abyssal Core Development, 12%. Kale frowned slightly. Core. Until recently, he technically didn't even have a functioning mana core. The Academy's crystal had measured his mana capacity as almost zero. But now, inside his chest, something new was forming. It didn't feel like the flowing warmth other mages described. Instead, it felt like a deep, endless void. Cold. Heavy. Hungry. A core made from pure abyssal energy. And with every monster he devoured, it grew stronger. Kale leaned against one of the pillars, breathing heavily. He had only been training for a few nights. Yet the difference was already obvious. His body felt faster. Sharper. Stronger. If someone from the Academy saw him fight now, they would never believe he was trash class. Far above the Shadow Grounds, life at Etherian Academy continued as normal. But whispers had begun spreading among the students. It started with the maintenance staff. Then the night patrol mages. Then the professors themselves. Something strange had been happening around the academy. Monsters. Several magical creatures that occasionally slipped through ancient barriers had been found dead in the outer forest. Training constructs had been destroyed overnight. And some of the sealed underground zones showed signs of recent combat. The strange part: no one had reported fighting anything. Students whispered nervously in the dining hall. I heard they found 3 mana beasts dead near the eastern training field. That's impossible, those things are too strong. Maybe a professor killed them. No professor was on patrol last night. The rumors spread quickly. Some students believed a rogue mage had infiltrated the academy. Others whispered about ancient creatures awakening beneath the ruins. Elite students began training more intensely. Security patrols increased. But none of them had the slightest idea what was actually happening. Because every night, while the academy slept, a single student walked quietly into the darkness below and grew stronger. Back in the shadow grounds, Kale continued moving deeper into the ruins. The map displayed by the system slowly expanded as he explored new areas. Ancient doors. Forgotten chambers. Trial arenas that hadn't been used in centuries. Each one contained a different challenge. Some held mana beasts. Others contained magical traps designed to test reaction speed. And some chambers forced Kale to fight multiple enemies at once. Every battle pushed him harder. Forced him to adapt. To survive. To evolve. One night, Kale found himself standing in another trial chamber surrounded by 3 mana constructs simultaneously. They attacked together. Blades of magical energy slicing through the air. Kale moved instinctively. His body reacting faster than his mind could process. He dodged the first attack. Devoured the second construct's mana. Then released another abyssal pulse that shattered the third. When the battle ended, he realized something terrifying. His movements had become natural. Efficient. Like a predator learning how to hunt. The system displayed another update. Abyssal core development, 23%. Kale stared at the number. It's growing. The abyss inside him stirred again. Stronger. Hungrier. But also more controlled. Kale closed his eyes briefly. For the first time in his life, he could feel power flowing through his body. Not borrowed magic. Not borrowed spells. But something that belonged entirely to him. Something the academy had never understood. Something the world itself had forgotten. When Kale finally returned to the surface just before dawn, he walked quietly across the academy courtyard like any other exhausted student. No one looked twice at him. No one noticed the faint dark energy hidden beneath his calm expression. To everyone else, he was still the same worthless trash class student. Still the boy who couldn't even cast basic spells. Still the academy's biggest joke. But deep beneath Etherean Magic Academy, something ancient had begun to stir. And the boy everyone mocked was slowly becoming the most dangerous existence within its walls. The hidden monster of the academy had begun to awaken. At Etherean Magic Academy, status meant everything. Not just for pride, but for survival. Students here weren't simply learning spells for the sake of knowledge. They were competing for power, recognition, and influence in a world where magic determined a person's worth. Nobles sponsored prodigies. Military divisions recruited top talents. Even royal courts sent observers to watch promising students. And every year, there was one event that decided who would rise, and who would remain at the bottom. The freshman ranking tournament. It was more than just a competition. It was a public demonstration of magical potential. A brutal spectacle where first-year students fought one another in front of professors, sponsors, and the entire academy. For elite students, it was a chance to climb the ranks. For weak students, it was often a public humiliation. The announcement echoed through the academy halls one bright morning. A magical projection appeared in the central courtyard as thousands of students gathered around. A senior instructor stepped forward. The annual freshman ranking tournament will begin tomorrow morning. Excited murmurs spread instantly. The results will determine your official combat rankings for the semester. A glowing list appeared behind him. Ranks. Rewards. Privileges. Higher-ranked students would gain access to advanced training chambers, better magical resources, and direct mentorship from high-level professors. For ambitious mages, the tournament was a golden opportunity. But standing near the back of the crowd, Kale Virion felt something very different. A quiet headache forming behind his eyes. Great. Kale rubbed his temple. I forgot this was coming. Over the past few weeks, his nights had been consumed by secret training beneath the academy in the Shadow Grounds. Every evening he descended into the ancient ruins, fighting mana beasts and surviving deadly trial chambers left behind by forgotten archmages. His abyssal core had grown stronger. His body had become faster. His control over Mana Devourer and Abyssal Pulse had improved dramatically. But none of that was supposed to be seen. Because on the surface, Kale still needed to be the same powerless trash class student everyone believed him to be. And tournaments were the worst possible place to hide strength. One of the students nearby laughed loudly. Hey look, trash class is here too. Another added mockingly, maybe he'll set a new record for fastest defeat. A few students chuckled. Kale ignored them. He had endured this for 3 years. The insults barely registered anymore. But the real problem wasn't the bullying. It was suspicion. If Kale suddenly showed strength now, questions would start appearing. Professors would investigate. Noble families might take interest. And if anyone discovered the Abyssal Archive system, things could get very dangerous. So Kale made a simple decision. Enter the tournament, lose quickly, and disappear. That way no one would suspect anything. The following day, the arena of Etherian Magic Academy was packed with students. Towering stone walls surrounded the massive battleground, and magical barriers shimmered faintly around the combat zone to prevent stray spells from injuring spectators. Dozens of professors sat in elevated viewing platforms. Among them were powerful mages whose mere presence filled the arena with pressure. The tournament had begun. One by one, students stepped into the arena to demonstrate their combat abilities. Spells exploded across the battlefield. Blades of wind sliced through the air. Fireballs erupted like miniature suns. Cheers echoed from the stands as talented students displayed impressive magical control. Meanwhile, Kale sat quietly near the back of the waiting area. He watched the battles calmly. But inside his mind, the system quietly displayed information. Spell analysis activated. Every spell cast in the arena appeared briefly within his vision as glowing diagrams. Runic structures. Mana flow patterns. Energy compression techniques. The system was analyzing them all automatically. Kale frowned slightly. So this is what real academy combat looks like. Compared to the Shadow Grounds, this felt almost slow. Mana beasts had attacked with lethal instinct. Ancient trial constructs forced him to react instantly. But these students, they hesitated. They relied on textbook techniques. Predictable casting sequences. Kale shook his head slightly. Focus. You're supposed to lose. A tournament assistant suddenly called out. Next match. 2 names appeared on the floating board. Kale Virion versus Darius Falcon. A wave of laughter spread across the arena. Wait. Trash class actually entered. Poor Darius. He got the easiest win of the day. Kale sighed quietly and stood up. He walked toward the arena calmly. On the opposite side of the battlefield stood his opponent. Darius Falcon. A tall, broad-shouldered student with fiery red hair and sharp, arrogant eyes. His uniform bore the silver emblem of a mid-tier noble family. Ranked C-class. Not an elite prodigy. But still far stronger than most students. Darius cracked his knuckles as Kale approached. Then he smirked. Well well, the Academy's famous trash class. His voice carried easily across the arena. You've got guts showing up here. The crowd chuckled. Kale didn't respond. He simply stood quietly in the center of the battlefield. Darius tilted his head slightly. You know what I hate the most? His smile disappeared. People like you. Kale blinked slightly. Darius continued coldly. You take up space in this academy while real mages fight to earn their place. His eyes narrowed. You're an insult to everyone here. Kale remained silent. But something about the way Darius spoke made the atmosphere shift slightly. This wasn't playful mockery. This was genuine hatred. The instructor raised his hand. Combatants ready. Magical barriers intensified around the arena. Darius rolled his shoulders. Kale exhaled slowly. Just dodge a few attacks, then surrender. The instructor dropped his hand. Begin. The moment the signal was given, Darius attacked. Mana erupted around his body like a blazing storm. A circle of flame ignited beneath his feet as he launched forward. Faster than Kale expected. Fire condensed into a spear in his hand. But something about his expression made Kale's chest tighten. Darius wasn't aiming to win. He was aiming to destroy. Burn, trash. The flaming spear shot forward. Kale barely moved aside as the attack exploded against the ground behind him. Boom. Stone shattered. The audience cheered. But Darius didn't stop. He raised both hands. Multiple fire circles formed in the air. 3. 5. 8. Kale's eyes widened. That's too much mana for a simple match. The instructor frowned from the sidelines. But before he could intervene, Darius unleashed the attack. A storm of fire lances screamed across the arena. Kale's instincts screamed danger. This wasn't a tournament strike. This was lethal force. He's trying to kill me. Kale dodged the first blast. Then the second. But the third exploded near his feet, throwing him off balance. He crashed against the stone floor. The fourth lance shot directly toward his chest. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Kale stared at the incoming spell. His mind flashed with memories. The academy mocking him. Students laughing. His mother's voice. And deep inside his chest, the abyss responded. The cold core pulsed violently. Dark energy surged through his body. The abyssal archive system activated instantly. Threat detected, defensive response initiated. Before Kale consciously decided anything, his body moved. His hand shot forward. And the abyss inside him erupted. Boom. A wave of dark energy exploded outward. The fire lance disintegrated instantly. The shockwave continued forward, and slammed directly into Darius. The impact was catastrophic. Darius's entire body lifted off the ground. His fire magic collapsed instantly as the dark pulse swallowed the battlefield. The explosion echoed across the arena. Silence followed. Dust slowly settled across the shattered stone floor. And at the center of the arena, Darius lay unconscious. His body skidded across the ground until it hit the arena wall. The magical barriers flickered violently. The entire arena was frozen. Students stared in disbelief. What just happened? Did Trash Class just win? Wait, that was one attack. Even the instructors looked confused. Kale stood quietly in the center of the battlefield. His hand still raised slightly. Inside his mind, the system displayed a calm message. Abyssal Pulse successfully activated. Kale's heart pounded. I messed up. That attack had been instinctive. His body reacted before he could suppress it. The crowd erupted into chaotic murmurs. How did he do that? Did Darius mess up his spell? Was that luck? Kale quickly lowered his hand. Then he looked around with an intentionally confused expression. Huh. He blinked awkwardly. I think his spell backfired. Some students nodded uncertainly. Others looked skeptical. But before the situation could escalate further, the instructor stepped forward. Match concluded. He looked down at Darius, who was still unconscious. Then back at Kale. Winner, Kale Virion. The crowd buzzed with disbelief. Kale scratched his head awkwardly. Sorry. Some students laughed again. Yeah, definitely luck. No way trash class could do that on purpose. Darius must have overloaded his spell. The explanation spread quickly. People accepted it. Because the alternative was too strange to believe. Kale quietly left the arena. Inside, his mind was racing. That was way too close. If someone had analyzed that attack properly, they might have sensed the abyssal mana. But as he reached the waiting area, Kale made a quick decision. He approached the tournament assistant. "I'd like to withdraw." The assistant blinked. "Withdraw?" Kale nodded sheepishly. "I think that win was just luck. I'd rather not embarrass myself further." The assistant shrugged. "Suit yourself." And just like that, Kale disappeared from the tournament. To the rest of the academy, it looked like nothing important had happened. Just a strange fluke victory. But high above the arena, one man hadn't laughed. Professor Elric Valen stood silently in the observation platform. Unlike the other professors, he wasn't smiling. His eyes remained fixed on the arena floor where the battle had occurred. A faint trace of dark energy still lingered in the air. Barely noticeable. Almost impossible to detect. But Elric Valen was no ordinary mage. He had spent decades studying forbidden magic. Ancient mana signatures. Powers that modern magic academies refused to acknowledge. And what he had sensed was not normal mana. Elric narrowed his eyes slightly. Interesting. The faintest trace of a smile appeared on his face. Because for just a moment during that attack, he had felt something ancient. Something dangerous. Something that definitely did not belong inside a student's body. And the source of it was the academy's weakest student. Kale Virion. Far below the professor's platform, Kale quietly walked back toward the dormitory buildings. His hands rested calmly in his pockets. But inside his chest, the abyss stirred. Because for the first time, the academy had witnessed a glimpse of the monster hidden beneath its weakest student. The arena of Etherean Magic Academy had long since emptied. The roaring cheers of the freshman ranking tournament had faded, students returned to their dormitories. And the shattered battlefield was now quiet under the glow of repair enchantments slowly stitching broken stone back together. But high above the arena, inside the observation balcony reserved for senior faculty, one man still stood silently. Professor Elric Valen. The night wind tugged gently at his long silver cloak as he stared down at the arena floor below. His sharp gray eyes were unfocused, as if he were staring through the stone itself rather than at it. The other professors had already left hours ago. To them, the tournament had been nothing unusual. Just another chaotic event where arrogant students clashed and showed off their magic. But Elric knew better. Because for a brief moment during that match, he had felt something that should not exist anymore. He slowly lifted one hand, allowing faint strands of mana to swirl around his fingers. Most people believed magic followed strict rules. Mana had identifiable signatures. Elemental mana carried warmth or chill depending on its nature. Holy mana felt radiant and pure. Curse mana had a cold, poisonous presence. But what Elric sensed earlier didn't match any known category. It was deeper. Older. Almost hungry. His eyes narrowed slightly. Impossible, he whispered quietly to himself. Because the sensation had been unmistakable. Ancient mana. A type of energy that had vanished from the world centuries ago during the Age of Collapse, when civilizations using forbidden magic destroyed themselves. Back then, certain mages had experimented with powers that devoured other magic. Powers capable of consuming mana itself. But those techniques had been sealed, banned, and erased from magical history. Yet during that brief moment in the arena, Elric had felt something eerily similar. And the source of that energy had been the last person anyone would suspect. Kale Virion. The academy's most pathetic student. Elric turned away from the balcony and began walking through the dimly lit faculty corridor. His footsteps echoed quietly across the marble floor. Kale Virion, the name lingered in his mind. 3 years. That boy had been at the academy for 3 years. His records were painfully clear. Mana capacity almost non-existent. Spell compatibility nearly zero. Physical combat ability barely average. In short, a complete failure. The Academy had only allowed him to remain because expelling him would have caused unnecessary paperwork. Yet today, that same boy had unleashed a pulse of mana strong enough to flatten a mid-tier mage in a single strike. Elric stopped walking. Something about that event felt wrong. Too sudden. Too unnatural. His eyes shifted slightly as he activated a subtle detection spell. Thin threads of mana spread outward through the hallway like invisible spider silk. He searched for lingering energy signatures. A few moments later, the threads returned, carrying information. Elric's expression hardened slightly. Interesting. There was still a faint trace of that strange mana lingering near the arena. Weak. Almost gone. But unmistakable. It carried a signature unlike anything taught in modern magical theory. A signature that whispered of something ancient and dangerous. Instead of sounding alarmed, however, Elric simply smiled faintly. Because after decades of hunting rogue mages and forbidden magic, curiosity had long replaced fear. Let's see what you really are, Kael Virion. He turned and disappeared into the darkness of the corridor. Far below the Academy grounds, hidden beneath layers of ancient stone, another figure moved through the labyrinthine tunnels of the Shadow Grounds. Kael Virion walked quietly down one of the deeper corridors, his breathing steady despite the long descent underground. Above him, the Academy slept peacefully. But here, the air felt heavy. The deeper sections of the ruins had not been touched in centuries. Dust coated the cracked walls, and ancient mana seals flickered weakly across old archways. Only faint crimson light from the Abyssal Archive system illuminated Kael's path. The translucent interface hovered beside him as usual. Exploration progress, 38% new training zone detected. Kael frowned slightly. Even deeper. The system map expanded. A new chamber pulsed faintly in the distance. Kael had already spent several weeks exploring the Shadow Grounds. Each night he descended further, facing stronger monsters and deadlier trial chambers. His control over Mana Devour had improved dramatically. The ability that once activated uncontrollably now responded to his intent. And his abyssal core. It had grown. Slowly. Steadily. Every mana beast he devoured fed that cold abyss inside his chest. But something strange had started happening recently. The mana he devoured wasn't just strengthening him. It was evolving. Adapting. The system displayed another notification. New skill evolution available. Ability, Mana Predation. Kael blinked. Predation. The interface expanded with explanation. Mana Predation, Level 1 allows host to consume active spell structures before impact. Absorbed spells are converted directly into abyssal energy. Kael's eyes widened slightly. You're telling me I can eat spells now? For most mages, spells were extremely dangerous once released. Even experienced bat lineage struggled to deflect powerful attacks. But this ability, if it worked the way the system described, it would allow Kael to completely nullify enemy magic. His heart beat slightly faster. All right, let's test it. The chamber ahead slowly opened. Massive stone doors creaked as ancient mechanisms activated. The room beyond was enormous. A circular arena far larger than any of the previous trial chambers. Ancient runes covered the floor. But these runes were different. Unlike the training trials above, these symbols glowed with containment magic. Kael's instincts immediately warned him. This place feels wrong. The system responded instantly. Warning sealed entity detected. Kael's stomach tightened. Sealed entity. Before he could step back, the runes across the chamber floor suddenly ignited. The ground trembled violently. Cracks spread through the ancient seal. And from the center of the arena, something massive began to rise. Stone shattered. Dust exploded upward. A colossal shape slowly emerged from beneath the broken seal. Kael felt the pressure immediately. A crushing wave of mana spread across the chamber. His body stiffened instinctively. That's not a mana beast. The creature standing before him was something far older. A towering monster with thick armored scales covering its body like jagged plates of black iron. Its head resembled that of an ancient drake, but its glowing red eyes burned with unnatural intelligence. Chains of ancient magic hung loosely from its limbs, remnants of the seal that had once imprisoned it. The system reacted instantly. Entity identified, guardian beast threat level, extremely high. Kale's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Extremely high. The creature's eyes locked onto him. For centuries, it had been sleeping beneath the academy, sealed away as a final defense mechanism guarding the deeper ruins. And now, it had awakened. The guardian beast roared. The sound shook the entire chamber. Stone pillars cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling. Kale barely managed to brace himself. Okay, that's bad. The creature moved. Fast. Far faster than something that large should have been able to move. Its massive claw slammed toward Kale. He jumped aside just in time. Boom. The ground exploded where the attack landed. Chunks of stone flew across the chamber. Kale rolled across the floor, his mind racing. I can't outrun this thing. The beast attacked again. A sweeping strike that shattered an entire pillar. Kale ducked under the attack and forced himself to focus. The creature's mana was immense. Far greater than anything he had faced before. But that also meant something else. More energy to devour. Kale raised his hand. Dark energy rippled through the air. Let's try this. The beast opened its jaws. A beam of condensed mana began forming inside its mouth. Kale's eyes widened. That's definitely a spell. The beam fired. A devastating blast of magical energy shot toward him. Normally, a spell like that would obliterate a student instantly. But Kale didn't dodge. Instead, he activated the new ability. Mana Predation. The moment the beam reached him, something incredible happened. The spell slowed. Then twisted. Then shattered into streams of raw mana. The energy was dragged toward Kale like water falling into a whirlpool. The abyss inside his chest surged violently. The beam vanished completely. Consumed. Kale gasped as the energy flooded his body. It worked. But the guardian beast was furious. It roared again, charging forward with unstoppable force. The chamber shook violently as the battle escalated. Kale dodged another crushing claw. Released an abyssal pulse that cracked the beast's armor. Devoured 2 more spell attacks with mana predation. But the fight was brutal. The guardian beast smashed pillars, shattered the floor, and nearly crushed Kale multiple times. The ancient chamber began collapsing around them. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Chunks of stone crashed down from above. But finally, after a desperate final clash, Kale gathered all the abyssal energy inside his core. Dark power surged through his body. Abyssal pulse. The shockwave exploded outward. The guardian beast's armor shattered. The creature roared once more before collapsing into fragments of dissolving mana. Silence followed. Kale dropped to one knee. His chest heaved with exhaustion. The entire chamber was destroyed. Half the ceiling had collapsed. Stone debris covered the arena floor. And far above the shadow grounds, a faint tremor spread through the academy grounds. Students sleeping in their dormitories stirred uneasily. A few professors looked up from their books. But only one man immediately recognized what had happened. Professor Elric Valen slowly turned toward the academy courtyard. His eyes narrowed. Because the mana shockwave he just felt carried that same ancient signature. Stronger this time. Much stronger. A slow smile spread across his face. So it wasn't a coincidence. Something powerful was growing beneath the academy. Something the world had not seen for centuries. And Elric Valen intended to find it. Because somewhere within the walls of Etherian Magic Academy, a monster was being born. At Etherian Magic Academy, real combat experience was considered the final step between theory and true mastery of magic. Books could teach spell structures. Training arenas could teach control. But nothing revealed a mage's true capability like facing a real monster that wanted to tear them apart. That was why every semester, the academy opened what was known as a dungeon gate training exercise. Artificial dungeon gates were carefully stabilized using powerful arcane arrays. These gates connected temporarily to naturally forming mana ecosystems scattered across the world. Inside those spaces lived magical beasts, unstable terrain, and mana-rich environments that simulated real battle conditions. The academy tightly controlled these gates. Professors monitored every movement. Emergency barriers stood ready to extract students if things became dangerous. For most students, the dungeon exercise was exciting. For others, it was terrifying. But for Kale Virion, standing quietly among a group of first-year students at the edge of the training grounds, the situation felt complicated. Before them, a swirling vortex of light hovered several meters above the ground. The temporary dungeon gate. It resembled a giant rotating sphere of glowing mana threads, constantly shifting and reforming like a living storm. Magical anchors placed around the area hummed softly, stabilizing the portal. Several professors stood nearby, overseeing the operation. One of them stepped forward and raised his voice. This gate connects to a low-tier monster zone. The creatures inside are mostly C rank and below. He gestured toward the vortex. You will enter in teams, clear assigned areas, and retrieve monster cores. A projection of rules appeared above the gate. No reckless spellcasting. Stay within assigned zones. Report dangerous anomalies immediately. Another instructor added sternly, this is not a competition. It is a controlled exercise. But everyone knew that wasn't entirely true. Even in training missions, students watched each other closely. Who defeated monsters fastest? Who demonstrated impressive spells? Who froze under pressure? These details shaped reputations. And reputations at Etherian Magic Academy could determine a mage's future. Excited chatter filled the crowd. I heard there are fire salamanders inside. C-rank monsters are easy if you work in teams. Finally, some real combat. Meanwhile, Kale stood quietly at the back of the group. From the outside, he looked like the same weak student everyone ignored. But inside his mind, the Abyssal Archive system had already begun analyzing the gate. A translucent interface hovered in his vision. Dungeon gate detected mana density, high energy source, natural mana ecosystem. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. High mana density. That meant something interesting. Monsters inside would contain enormous amounts of magical energy. Energy his ability could consume. But Kale quickly suppressed the thought. No. He couldn't reveal his power here. There were professors everywhere. If anyone sensed abyssal mana, the consequences would be unpredictable. So Kale simply followed the assigned group of students as they approached the portal. The moment his body passed through the swirling gate, the world changed instantly. The bright academy courtyard vanished. Cold wind rushed across his face. He stumbled forward onto uneven ground. The dungeon environment stretched out before them like an alien world. Jagged cliffs rose from the earth. Purple clouds churned in the sky. Strange plants glowed faintly with bioluminescent mana. And in the distance, monsters moved. The environment itself pulsed with raw magical energy. A typical dungeon ecosystem. Kale quietly observed the surroundings. Several other students from his team began preparing spells. A nervous boy muttered, "Okay, just stick together and we'll be fine." Another student pointed toward a rocky slope. "Look. Mana wolves." 3 creatures resembling wolves made of flickering blue mana prowled along the cliff. One of the more confident students stepped forward. "I'll handle them." He raised his hand. Wind mana gathered quickly around his fingers. A slicing blade of compressed air shot forward. The spell struck the lead wolf. The creature howled before dissolving into scattered mana fragments. The other wolves lunged. But the group worked together. Spells flashed. Explosions echoed. Within minutes, the monsters were defeated. The students cheered lightly. That was easier than expected. Kale simply pretended to catch his breath like everyone else. But deep inside his chest, the abyss stirred. Even from a distance, he could feel the mana released by those dying monsters. It called to him. Hungry. But Kale resisted. Stay normal. That was his only goal. The group continued moving deeper into the dungeon zone. More monsters appeared. Mana wolves. Stone golems. Crystal insects. The battles grew slightly more intense. Students cast spells. Formations were tested. Occasionally someone stumbled or panicked, but the professors watching from the gate entrance ensured nothing became too dangerous. At least. That was how the exercise was supposed to go. Then everything changed. It started with a vibration. A faint tremor that rippled across the ground. At first, no one noticed. But Kale felt it immediately. His abyssal core reacted. The cold energy inside his chest pulsed sharply. The system interface flickered. Warning dungeon stability decreasing. Kale froze. What? Before he could react further, the sky above the dungeon darkened. The purple clouds twisted violently as raw mana surged across the environment. A loud crack echoed through the air. Students looked around nervously. What was that? Another tremor shook the ground. This time, everyone felt it. A distant roar echoed from somewhere deeper within the dungeon. Then another. And another. The system interface flashed red. Catastrophe event detected. Dungeon evolution, active threat level escalating. Kale's eyes widened. Dungeon evolution. Dungeon ecosystems were living mana environments. Occasionally, under certain conditions, the entire ecosystem could mutate. When that happened, the monster population changed. New creatures appeared. And danger levels skyrocketed. Students began panicking. Wait, this isn't part of the exercise. We need to return to the gate. They turned back toward the portal entrance. But the moment they reached the clearing, everyone froze. The dungeon gate was unstable. The swirling vortex flickered violently. Arcane anchors around it sparked erratically. Outside the gate, professors shouted orders. Stabilize the barrier. Mana pressure is spiking. We can't maintain the portal. The connection between worlds was collapsing. And inside the dungeon, monsters began emerging. Dozens. Then hundreds. Creatures far stronger than the original C-rank population crawled out from caves and ravines. Massive mana serpents. Armored crystal beasts. Shadow creatures that moved like living darkness. Students screamed. This is a catastrophe zone. Run. Spells exploded across the battlefield as students desperately tried to defend themselves. But the monsters kept coming. Elite students from other teams joined the fight. Some powerful second-year mages attempted to form defensive barriers. But the sheer number of monsters was overwhelming. Chaos spread across the dungeon. Meanwhile, Kale stood quietly among the terrified students. And something strange happened. He wasn't afraid. Instead, he could feel it. The mana. Every monster in this dungeon carried massive amounts of energy. His abyssal core reacted like a predator surrounded by prey. The system displayed a notification. Multiple high-density mana sources detected. Kale clenched his fists. If I devour even half of this energy, his power would grow tremendously. But revealing his abilities here would be dangerous. So Kale did something unexpected. He stayed hidden. He pretended to struggle like everyone else. Dodging attacks. Casting weak defensive spells. Running alongside panicked students. But whenever no one was watching, he moved differently. A giant crystal beast lunged toward a group of wounded students. Before it could strike, a silent wave of dark energy burst from the shadows. Abyssal pulse. The monster shattered instantly. But by the time the students turned around, Kale was already standing far away, pretending to recover from a fall. Another monster charged from behind a group of mages. Its jaws opened. A blast of energy prepared to fire. But suddenly, the spell vanished midair. Consumed. Mana predation. The monster staggered. Confused. Then collapsed moments later. Students looked around nervously. Did someone just kill that thing? I didn't see anyone, the whispers began spreading. Something was helping them. But no one could see who. Deep in the dungeon shadows, Kale continued moving silently. Every monster he secretly destroyed fed his abyssal core. The system displayed constant updates. Abyssal core development, 41%. Kale's breathing remained calm. His movements precise. Like a ghost walking through chaos. Above the collapsing dungeon, professors fought desperately to stabilize the gate. Arcane circles blazed across the courtyard. Mana anchors strained under the pressure. One instructor shouted, "We can't hold it much longer." Professor Elric Valen stood silently near the gate. His eyes closed. He was sensing something. Inside the dungeon. Something unusual. A faint, familiar mana signature flickered across his perception. Dark. Ancient. Hungry. Elric's eyes slowly opened. So it's you again. Back inside the dungeon, the last wave of monsters finally fell. Exhausted students collapsed to the ground. Some injured. Some trembling. But alive. A moment later, the dungeon gate stabilized enough for evacuation. One by one, survivors stumbled through the portal back to the academy grounds. Medics rushed forward. Professors shouted instructions. But many students whispered the same thing. Someone saved us. I swear there was a shadow moving through the monsters. A mage, stronger than anyone here. But no one could identify who it was. Standing quietly at the back of the crowd, Kale simply looked tired. Just another exhausted student. No one paid attention to him. Except one man. Professor Elric Valen watched him carefully. Because during the catastrophe, that strange ancient mana had appeared again. And this time, it had saved the entire academy. But Elric understood something the others didn't. If that power truly belonged to a student, then Etherean Magic Academy wasn't just training mages anymore. It was unknowingly nurturing a monster. The dungeon catastrophe should have ended the moment the last wave of monsters fell. That was what the professors outside the gate believed. From their perspective, the unstable dungeon ecosystem had reached its limit, the monster population had been wiped out. And the surviving students were already being evacuated through the barely stabilized gate. But deep inside the dungeon's collapsing ecosystem, something far more dangerous had just awakened. The air itself had changed. The chaotic battlefield where students had struggled moments ago had grown eerily quiet. Broken monster corpses dissolved into raw mana, drifting through the air like faint glowing dust. The jagged cliffs and fractured terrain trembled constantly as the dungeon's unstable mana field continued mutating violently. Most of the students had already begun retreating toward the exit. But Kale Virion remained behind. Not because he was reckless, but because the Abyssal Archive system had suddenly displayed a warning that froze him in place. The translucent interface flickered sharply before his eyes. Warning, catastrophe level entity detected. Kale's chest tightened. Catastrophe level. His gaze slowly lifted toward the distant valley beyond the battlefield. Something was moving. At first, it looked like a distortion in the air. A swirling mass of darkness twisting against the unstable sky. But as the shape grew closer, Kale began to understand the horrifying truth. This wasn't just another monster. It was something far beyond the creatures the Academy had expected inside this dungeon. The ground cracked as the entity finally revealed itself. A massive creature emerged from the abyssal fog like a nightmare crawling out of darkness. Its body was enormous, easily 3 times larger than any monster Kale had faced so far. Black armor-like scales covered its form, but they weren't solid. They seemed to ripple and shift constantly, like liquid shadows. 6 jagged limbs dug into the earth as the creature crawled forward. And at the center of its body, a single glowing core pulsed like a dying star. The system reacted instantly. Entity identified. Void Devourer threat level, extreme. Kale's breath caught. Void Devourer. The creature lifted its massive head slowly. Where I should have been, there was only darkness. A swirling void that seemed to absorb the light around it. The monster's presence alone distorted the air. Kale immediately understood the situation. This thing had not existed in the original dungeon ecosystem. It had been born from the catastrophe. A mutation created by the unstable mana environment. The worst possible outcome. The Void Devourer released a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the entire valley. The ground trembled violently. Kale clenched his fists. If that thing reaches the students, the survivors evacuating toward the gate would be slaughtered. Even the professors outside the dungeon might struggle against something like this. And right now, Kale was the only one standing between the monster and the rest of the academy. The system's interface flickered again. Special condition detected. Void Devourer core contains immense mana density. Devouring target may trigger abyssal evolution. Kale stared at the message. Evolution. Another line appeared beneath it. Warning: host survival probability, 34%. Kale exhaled slowly. 34%. Not great. But running away wasn't an option. Behind him, the last group of students were disappearing through the unstable gate. They had no idea this monster even existed. Which meant this battle would happen in secret. Kale lowered his stance slightly as the Void Devourer began moving toward him. Each step shook the ground. The creature's massive limbs carved trenches into the earth as it crawled forward with terrifying speed. "All right," Kale muttered quietly. "Guess we're doing this." The monster attacked. One of its massive limbs slammed toward him like a falling pillar. Kale barely managed to leap aside. The impact shattered the ground where he had been standing. Dust exploded into the air. The sheer force of the attack sent a shockwave across the valley. Kale rolled across the ground and quickly regained his footing. "That thing is way stronger than the guardian beast." The Void Devourer roared again. This time, the glowing core in its chest began pulsating rapidly. Kale's instincts screamed danger. Spell incoming. The creature opened a massive fracture in its chest armor. Dark energy gathered around the core. Then, a beam of compressed void mana fired toward him. Kale reacted instantly. Mana predation. The abyss inside his chest surged violently. Dark tendrils burst outward from his body like invisible roots. They wrapped around the incoming beam. For a brief moment, the spell resisted. The Void Devourer's mana was incredibly dense. But then, the beam shattered. The energy was ripped apart and pulled directly into Kale's chest. His entire body trembled as the power surged through him. That's a lot of mana. But the monster didn't stop. It charged forward again, this time far faster than before. Kale barely dodged the next attack. A claw sliced across his shoulder, sending him crashing into the ground. Pain exploded through his arm. Kale gritted his teeth as he pushed himself up. Okay, this thing is not playing around. The system displayed another message. Abyssal core resonance increasing. Kale could feel it too. The abyss inside him was reacting violently to the presence of the Void Devourer. The two energies seemed almost connected. The monster roared again and lunged toward him. Kale's eyes hardened. Fine. He stopped holding back. Until now, he had always restrained his power. Even in the dungeon catastrophe, he had fought carefully, making sure no one saw his true abilities. But here, there was no one watching. Only him and the monster. Dark energy erupted from his body. The abyss finally revealed itself. Black mana surged through the air like a storm as Kale raised his hand. Abyssal pulse. The attack exploded outward. But this time, the power was far greater than anything he had used before. The shockwave slammed into the Void Devourer's body. Cracks spread across its armor. The monster staggered. But it didn't fall. Instead, it roared even louder. Its body absorbed the impact and began regenerating rapidly. Kale's eyes widened. You can regenerate? Of course it could. This thing was born from a mana catastrophe. Its entire body was basically a living mana core. Which meant Kale suddenly realized the truth. He didn't need to destroy the monster's body. He only needed to devour the core. The glowing sphere pulsing in its chest. The Void Devourer attacked again. But this time, Kale moved differently. Faster. More aggressive. The abyssal energy flowing through his veins sharpened every movement. He dodged the creature's claws and leaped onto its back. The monster thrashed violently, trying to shake him off. Kale clung to its armor plates as he forced his hand toward the glowing core. Let's end this. He activated his power at full strength. Mana Devour. The moment his hand touched the core, everything exploded. The abyss inside his chest opened like a bottomless pit. The Void Devourer's mana poured into him uncontrollably. The creature shrieked in agony. Its massive body began disintegrating as its energy was ripped away piece by piece. Kale's vision blurred as overwhelming power flooded his system. The interface flickered rapidly. Abyssal core overload evolution triggered the monster's final roar echoed across the collapsing dungeon. Then. Silence. The Void Devourer's body shattered completely. Its mana core vanished into Kale's abyss. For several seconds, Kale stood frozen in place. Then he collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. The entire dungeon trembled violently. Without the boss monster stabilizing the ecosystem, the dungeon began collapsing completely. Chunks of terrain crumbled into the void. The sky above fractured like broken glass. Kale forced himself to stand. Time to leave. He staggered toward the evacuation gate just as the dungeon began collapsing behind him. When Kale finally stepped back onto the academy training grounds, the professors were still organizing the surviving students. No one noticed him. Everyone was too busy dealing with the catastrophe. But deep inside the collapsing dungeon, the remains of the Void Devourer were discovered. Completely destroyed. Even the professors couldn't believe what they were seeing. That thing should have been impossible for the students to defeat. One of the instructors whispered. Another muttered nervously. Then who killed it? The rumors spread quickly among the survivors. Students spoke quietly among themselves. There was someone fighting in the darkness. I saw a shadow moving through the monsters. Whoever it was, they saved us. By the next morning, a strange rumor had begun spreading across the academy. About a mysterious figure who had appeared during the catastrophe. A powerful mage who defeated the dungeon boss alone. Students began calling the unknown savior something new. The hidden monster of the academy. Meanwhile, in the far corner of the academy courtyard, Kale Virion quietly walked toward his morning classes. His uniform was slightly wrinkled. His posture looked tired. And when a group of students passed by him, they sneered the same way they always did. Look, it's trash class. Still alive somehow. Kale simply ignored them and kept walking. Because none of them knew the truth. The monster they were whispering about was the very student they mocked every day. The story of the dungeon catastrophe spread through Etherian Magic Academy faster than any official announcement ever could. Students whispered about it in the dining halls. Professors discussed it quietly behind closed doors. Even the usually composed instructors of the academy's upper circles showed visible unease. Because something about that incident did not make sense. The dungeon had evolved into a catastrophe zone, something that should have killed dozens of inexperienced students. Yet somehow, almost everyone survived. Even stranger, the final dungeon boss, a monstrous entity later identified by professors as a Void Devourer, had been found completely destroyed inside the collapsing dungeon. Not weakened. Not injured. Completely annihilated. And no one had seen who killed it. The official Academy report called it an unexplained collapse of the dungeon ecosystem. But no one truly believed that explanation. Among the students, a rumor began spreading. A name whispered through dormitory corridors and training halls. The hidden monster of the academy. Some claimed they had seen a shadow moving through the battlefield during the catastrophe. Others said they felt a strange surge of mana right before powerful monsters died instantly. And a few survivors swore they had sensed a presence in the darkness, something far stronger than any student should be. Naturally, rumors like that attracted attention. Especially from people who thrived on power. In the northern courtyard of the Academy's elite training grounds, several high-ranking students stood gathered around a stone table carved with magical runes. Their uniforms were immaculate. their posture confident. Each of them carried the aura of someone born into magical nobility. These were not ordinary students. They were the heirs of powerful families, future archmages, military commanders, and noble house leaders. And they did not like mysteries. One of them slammed a hand against the table. "This is ridiculous." The speaker was a tall student with silver hair tied neatly behind his head. His name was Arten Valcrest, heir to one of the Western noble houses. An unknown mage appears during a catastrophe-level dungeon event, defeats the boss monster alone, and disappears, he scoffed. "That's not luck. That's someone hiding their strength." Another student nodded grimly. "And whoever it is, they stole the glory of the entire academy." A third leaned forward slightly. "Or worse." He tapped the table thoughtfully. "Someone might be hiding forbidden magic." At that statement, the group fell silent. Forbidden magic was not something spoken lightly at Etherian. But recent events had raised uncomfortable questions. The mana traces discovered inside the collapsed dungeon did not match any known spell type taught by the academy. That meant one of two things. Either an extremely powerful mage had intervened secretly, or someone inside the academy possessed abilities that should not exist. Arden crossed his arms. "Whoever this hidden monster is, we'll find them." His expression hardened. "And when we do, we'll decide whether they deserve recognition or elimination." But there was one student among them who remained silent the entire time. A tall young man stood slightly apart from the others. His long black hair moved gently in the wind as he gazed toward the academy's central tower. His name was Lucian Draven, the undisputed top-ranked prodigy of Etherian Magic Academy. Unlike the other nobles, Lucian had not spoken once during the discussion. He simply closed his eyes briefly and focused. Ever since the dungeon catastrophe, he had been feeling something strange. A faint pressure in the air. Like an unseen rival quietly growing stronger somewhere within the academy walls. Lucian slowly opened his eyes. Someone interesting appeared during that disaster. Arden frowned. "You sensed it too?" Lucian nodded slightly. The mana signature was unusual. He paused. Very unusual. Lucian was known for his incredible sensitivity to mana fluctuations. If someone had used a powerful spell nearby, he could often identify its source instantly. But during the dungeon catastrophe, the energy he sensed had felt different. Darker. Older. Almost like something that didn't belong in this era. Lucian's lips curved slightly into a faint smile. "Whoever that person is," his eyes sharpened. "They're hiding among us." Meanwhile, across the academy grounds in a quiet stone classroom, another man was studying a different kind of evidence. Professor Elric Valen stood before a large magical projection displaying fragments of recorded mana signatures gathered during the dungeon catastrophe. Floating strands of energy danced slowly across the projection. Elric's expression was calm. But his eyes were focused intensely. He had spent the last 2 days analyzing the remnants of mana found in the dungeon. And the conclusion he had reached was deeply unsettling. Because the energy he detected was unmistakable. Abyssal mana. A type of magical energy that should have vanished centuries ago. Elric slowly folded his arms. So it wasn't a coincidence. He already suspected something unusual about Kael Virion during the freshman ranking tournament. But the dungeon catastrophe confirmed it. That same strange mana signature had appeared again. Far stronger. Far more active. And while many professors were now pushing the Academy Council to investigate all students involved in the dungeon mission, Elric had done something unexpected. He quietly erased several key mana readings from the official investigation. The records now showed incomplete data. Enough to confuse the council. But not enough to expose the true source of the energy. Because Elric wasn't ready to reveal the truth yet. He wanted to understand it first. And that meant watching carefully. Watching Kael Virion. Far from the political discussions and quiet investigations unfolding across the academy, Kael himself remained blissfully unaware of how much attention he was attracting. At that moment, he was standing alone in the familiar darkness of the Shadow Grounds. The underground ruins beneath the academy had become his personal training ground. Stone corridors stretched endlessly into the distance as faint glowing runes illuminated the ancient walls. The abyssal archive system hovered quietly before his eyes. But tonight, something was different. The system interface displayed a message Kale had never seen before. Ancient relic analysis complete. Kale frowned slightly. Relic analysis. The system expanded the message. Source of system activation, abyssal relic fragment. Additional fragments detected beneath Academy Foundation. Total relics identified, 7. Kale froze. 7. The chamber around him suddenly felt colder. The relic he discovered weeks ago, the one that awakened the abyssal archive system, was apparently only one piece of something much larger. The interface displayed a map. 7 faint markers appeared beneath the academy grounds. Each one buried deep within the ancient ruins. Kale's mind raced. Why would something like this be buried under the academy? The system responded immediately. Historical data fragment recovered. Purpose of relic network, containment system. Kale's stomach tightened. Containment. The map shifted again. This time revealing something far more disturbing. Beneath the network of relic fragments, something enormous lay sealed deep underground. A massive magical structure hidden beneath layers of ancient stone and arcane barriers. The system labeled it simply, Primary Abyssal Seal. Kale stared at the projection in disbelief. The academy was built on top of a prison. The realization sent a chill through his body. The relic he activated hadn't just given him power. It had been part of a much larger system designed to contain something dangerous. Something ancient. Something buried beneath the academy for centuries. Kale slowly clenched his fists. What exactly did I wake up? The system did not answer. But far above the shadow grounds, in the highest tower of Etherean Magic Academy, Professor Elric Valen stood quietly at the window overlooking the sleeping campus. The wind rustled softly through the tower balcony. Elric gazed down at the academy grounds with thoughtful eyes. Because he could feel it. The faint ripple of ancient mana spreading slowly beneath the academy foundations. Something deep below was stirring. And somehow, it was connected to one particular student. Kale Virion. Elric smiled faintly. Whatever you are, his voice was barely louder than the wind. You're about to change this academy forever. Night had become Kale Virion's true classroom. While the prestigious halls of Etherean Magic Academy quieted under moonlight, while the noble heirs and prodigy students slept comfortably in enchanted dormitories, the academy's most ridiculed student once again walked alone into the forgotten darkness beneath the campus. The entrance to the shadow grounds had long since become familiar to him. Broken stone corridors. Dust that had not been disturbed for centuries. Faint runic inscriptions flickering weakly on ancient walls. But tonight felt different. Because the abyssal archive system hovering before his eyes had revealed something that completely changed everything he thought he understood. 7 relic fragments. Not 1. 7. And according to the system, each of them was part of a larger containment network buried beneath the academy. Which meant one thing. The relic that awakened his powers was not an accident. Someone had built this place intentionally. Kale stepped deeper into the underground ruins, his boots echoing softly against the cracked stone floor. The deeper tunnels of the shadow grounds felt colder than usual. The air carried a strange heaviness, like the weight of something ancient pressing against the walls themselves. In front of him, the translucent system interface flickered again. Relic fragment coordinates. Updated access path, restricted depths. Kale frowned slightly. Restricted depths. That sounded far beyond anything the academy officially knew about. He had already explored several underground layers during his training, facing ancient trial chambers and forgotten magical constructs. But according to the system's map, those areas were just the outer layers. Beneath them lay something much older. Something sealed away intentionally. Kale hesitated for a moment. Then exhaled quietly. Guess I don't have a choice. Because if the relic that awakened him was part of a larger system, then whatever lay below might explain why he had this power in the first place. And whether or not it would eventually destroy him. He continued descending. The corridor grew narrower, forcing him to walk sideways through collapsed stone passages. Strange black crystals embedded in the walls pulsed faintly with unstable mana. After several minutes, the architecture around him began changing. The ruins here looked older. Far older. The smooth stone construction of the Academy's foundation had vanished. Instead, the walls were carved from massive ancient blocks covered in symbols that Kale had never seen before. Not modern magic. Not Academy runes. These inscriptions looked raw. Primitive. Like something created during the earliest days of civilization. Kale slowed his pace. What is this place? The system answered immediately. Ancient structure identified origin, pre-Aetherian era purpose, containment facility. Kale's stomach tightened. Containment again, he continued forward cautiously. Soon the narrow corridor opened into something enormous. Kale stopped walking. His breath caught in his throat. Because the chamber before him was massive. A cavern so large that its ceiling vanished into darkness hundreds of meters above. And at the center of it, something even more terrifying stood. A colossal circular barrier surrounded a pit of pure darkness. Chains made of glowing magical energy stretched across the void like giant webs, connecting to towering stone pillars around the chamber. Each pillar was engraved with countless runic seals. The entire structure looked like a prison. Kale stepped forward slowly. This can't be real. The system interface flickered again. Primary abyssal seal detected status, active integrity, 72%. Kale's eyes widened. A seal. He approached one of the massive pillars carefully. The runes carved into its surface were incredibly complex. Even with the system assisting his perception, Kale could barely understand their structure. These weren't ordinary spells. They were binding rituals. Magic designed specifically to imprison something. And judging by the scale of this structure, whatever had been sealed here was not small. The system suddenly displayed another message. Historical data fragment. Recovered images flooded Kale's mind. Not memories. Records. Fragments of something ancient stored within the relic network. For a moment, Kale was no longer standing inside the chamber. Instead, he saw the past. The cavern around him was different. The pillars were new. Hundreds of mages stood around the massive pit, chanting in unison. Their robes were different from modern academy uniforms. Older. More ceremonial. Each mage channeled enormous amounts of mana into the ceiling structure. In the center of the pit, something moved. Something enormous. Something that made Kale's chest tighten with instinctive fear. The image blurred. But one thing was clear. This place had once been the battlefield of an ancient war. The vision faded. Kale stumbled slightly as reality returned. An ancient war. The system displayed the explanation. Conflict identified, abyssal war opponents, archmages versus abyssal entities. Outcome, abyssal entities sealed beneath present academy location. Kale stared at the glowing words. Abyssal entities, his mind raced. Everything suddenly started making sense. The abyssal mana inside his body. The relic that awakened him. The ancient prison beneath the academy. All of it was connected. The system displayed one final message. Relic network purpose identified. Secondary function, host creation protocol. Kale blinked. Host creation. The interface expanded. Project designation, living weapon objective, create compatible host capable of controlling abyssal energy. Purpose, defense mechanism in case abyssal seal fails. Kale felt his blood run cold. You're saying, his voice barely came out. I'm not an accident. The system responded. Host compatibility, 99.7% final compatible candidate identified. Host name, Kale Virion. The words hovered in the air like a sentence passed by fate itself. Kale stared at them in silence. For years, he had believed his weakness was a mistake. That his nearly empty mana core meant he was born defective. But now, he understood the truth. His body hadn't been weak. It had been prepared. Prepared to house something that normal mages could never survive. A living weapon capable of controlling abyssal energy. Kale slowly clenched his fists. So my entire life had been leading to this. The system flickered again. But this time, the message was different. Warning: full abyssal awakening carries extreme risk. Kale narrowed his eyes. Risk. Another line appeared beneath it. Abyssal entities possess detection abilities across dimensional boundaries. Full awakening will alert surviving abyssal beings. Kale froze. Alert them. The system confirmed. Entities responsible for ancient civilization collapses may detect host presence. The weight of that statement hit Kale immediately. If he fully awakened the abyssal power inside him, the same entities that once destroyed civilizations might notice him. And if they noticed him, they might come to the academy, to the surface world. Kale slowly looked back toward the massive sealed pit in the center of the chamber. So if I keep getting stronger, he whispered, I might be the reason the seal breaks. For the first time since awakening the system, fear crept into his chest. Because until now, his power had only affected him. But this could threaten the entire academy. Maybe even the world. Kale turned away from the abyssal seal slowly. I need to be careful. He had to control this power. Not unleash it recklessly. But as he began walking toward the exit, something changed. The abyss inside his chest stirred violently. The system interface flickered rapidly. Warning: abyssal presence detected. Kale stopped walking. What? A faint ripple spread across the sealed pit behind him. The magical chains trembled slightly. The darkness inside the abyssal prison shifted. Like something deep inside had just moved. The system displayed a final message. Attention, host has been noticed. Kale slowly turned back toward the pit. The darkness inside seemed deeper now. Colder. Hungrier. And somewhere within that endless void, something ancient had opened its eyes. Something that had just realized. A compatible host existed again. Far above the underground ruins, the peaceful campus of Etherean Magic Academy slept under the night sky. Students dreamed about exams. Professors reviewed lesson plans. No one realized what had just happened beneath their feet. But deep below the academy foundations, something had begun watching Kale Virion. And the moment it fully awakened, the world above would never be the same again. By the time the rumors reached their peak, the entire academy had already chosen what it wanted to believe. Most students believed the hidden monster of the academy was nothing more than an exaggerated story born from the chaos of the dungeon catastrophe. Others believed it was a mysterious upperclassman who had intervened and left before anyone could identify them. A few of the more paranoid nobles whispered about secret agents sent by powerful mage families. But there was one person who didn't believe any of those explanations. Lucian Draven, the academy's top-ranked prodigy. From the outside, Lucian appeared calm, disciplined, and almost detached from the endless rivalries that defined Etherean Magic Academy. He rarely participated in petty disputes, rarely wasted energy mocking weaker students, and rarely showed emotion during combat training. But behind that composed expression existed something far sharper. Lucian possessed one of the rarest magical traits known among elite mages: mana perception. It allowed him to sense the structure and density of magical energy far more precisely than ordinary spellcasters. Even subtle distortions in mana flow could not escape his awareness. And ever since the dungeon catastrophe, something had been bothering him. A faint inconsistency. A presence hidden among the academy's thousands of students. At first it was only a whisper of energy. But over the past few days, that whisper had grown stronger. Lucian stood quietly on the balcony of the academy's central tower, overlooking the massive courtyard where students trained daily. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd below. Dozens of students practiced spellcasting. Some conjured flames. Others manipulated wind or lightning. Normal magic. Predictable magic. But hidden somewhere among them was someone different. Lucian closed his eyes. He focused on the flow of mana across the courtyard. The invisible currents of magical energy drifting between students. Then he felt it. A tiny distortion. Barely noticeable. But unmistakable. His eyes opened slowly. Found you. Down below, walking quietly along the edge of the courtyard with a stack of textbooks in his arms, was a student no one else paid attention to. Kale Virion. The Academy's infamous trash class. Lucien watched him carefully. To anyone else, Kale looked ordinary. Almost weak. His posture was relaxed, his movements unremarkable. But Lucien noticed something subtle. The mana around Kale behaved strangely. It didn't flow normally. Instead, it seemed to avoid him. Like water bending around a stone. Lucien's lips curved slightly. Interesting. Because that phenomenon should have been impossible. Students with extremely low mana capacity should barely influence the surrounding mana field. Yet Kale was doing the opposite. He was distorting it. Lucien leaned slightly over the balcony railing. So you're hiding something. Below in the courtyard, Kale suddenly felt a strange sensation run down his spine. The abyssal core inside his chest stirred faintly. He frowned slightly. Someone's watching me. He slowly glanced around the courtyard. Students were everywhere. Training. Laughing. Arguing. Nothing unusual. But instinctively, Kale's gaze drifted upward toward the central tower. And for a brief moment, his eyes met Lucien Draven's. The Academy's strongest prodigy. The two stared at each other across the courtyard. Lucien's expression remained calm. But Kale immediately felt something unsettling. A quiet pressure. Like standing in front of a predator that had already decided to hunt. Lucien turned and disappeared from the balcony. But Kale's chest tightened slightly. That guy noticed something. For the next few days, things seemed to return to normal. Classes continued. Students trained. Rumors about the dungeon catastrophe slowly began fading into background noise. But beneath the surface, something was building. Because Lucien Draven had already made a decision. And when the opportunity finally arrived, he acted without hesitation. It happened during the Academy's weekly combat demonstration. Students gathered in the central arena to observe advanced spellcasting techniques performed by top-ranked mages. The massive circular battlefield was surrounded by towering stands filled with hundreds of spectators. Professors watched from elevated platforms. Students whispered excitedly among themselves. At the center of the arena stood Lucien Draven. He had just finished demonstrating an advanced lightning spell that shattered 3 reinforced training constructs simultaneously. Thunder still echoed across the arena as the constructs collapsed into broken fragments. The crowd erupted in applause. Lucien's incredible. No wonder he's the top prodigy. He's already stronger than some professors. Lucien stood calmly in the center of the battlefield as the applause slowly faded. Then he raised one hand slightly. I would like to request a duel. The crowd immediately quieted. A duel request from Lucien Draven was not something that happened often. The supervising instructor nodded. Very well. Who do you challenge? Lucien didn't hesitate. His voice echoed clearly across the arena. Kale Virion. For a moment, no one reacted. Then the entire arena exploded with laughter. Wait, what? He's challenging trash class. Is this a joke? In the stands, Kale slowly looked up from his seat. You've got to be kidding. The instructor looked confused. Lucien, are you certain? Lucien nodded calmly. Yes. He glanced directly toward Kale. I wish to test something. All eyes turned toward the confused trash class student sitting near the back row. Kale sighed internally. This is bad. He stood slowly. I'd rather not. More laughter erupted. Of course he wouldn't. He knows he'll get destroyed. But Lucien's voice cut through the noise. A duel challenge issued under Academy Combat Law Article 12 cannot be declined without forfeiting rank privileges. Kale froze. Of course. Academy Law. Official duel requests between students could not be rejected without consequences. Even trash class students still held minimal rank status. Which meant he had no choice. Kale slowly walked down toward the arena floor. The crowd buzzed with excitement. This is going to be brutal. Lucien's going to destroy him. He might end the match in 1 second. Kale stepped into the battlefield and scratched the back of his head awkwardly. So what exactly are we testing? Lucien looked at him quietly. Then spoke softly. I want to see what happens when you stop pretending. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. Pretending. Lucien stepped closer. Your mana flow is abnormal. The words were quiet enough that the audience couldn't hear them. But I can. Kale's heartbeat slowed. He really noticed. Lucien raised his hand. Lightning began crackling around his fingers. Let's begin. The instructor activated the arena barrier. Combatants ready. Kale exhaled slowly. All right. He just needed to survive. Without revealing too much. The instructor dropped his hand. Begin. Lucien attacked instantly. Lightning exploded across the battlefield like a storm. His speed was terrifying. In a single motion, he launched 3 lightning spears toward Kale. Kale dodged the first. Barely slipped past the second. But the third exploded beside him, sending him sliding across the arena floor. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Lucien didn't stop. More lightning gathered around him. Advanced spells. Far beyond normal student-level magic. The sky above the arena darkened as electric currents surged violently through the battlefield. Kale forced himself to stay calm. Don't use abyssal energy. He dodged another attack. Then another. But Lucien kept advancing. The prodigy's eyes remained focused. Careful. Observing. Testing. Interesting. Lucien murmured. You're much faster than your records suggest. The crowd was beginning to notice. Wait. Trash Class is keeping up. How is he dodging those attacks? Kale exhaled slowly. He needed to end this without revealing too much. Lucien raised both hands. Lightning spiraled together above his head. A massive spell formation began forming. Even the professors leaned forward slightly. That's an advanced spell. Kale's instinct screamed danger. If that attack landed, he might actually die. The abyss inside his chest stirred. But Kale forced it down. Instead, he channeled the smallest fragment of abyssal energy possible. Just enough. Lucien released the spell. A massive lightning strike descended toward Kale. The arena exploded in light. But when the flash faded, Kale was still standing. The lightning had been deflected. Not destroyed. Deflected. Lucien's eyes widened slightly. The crowd erupted into stunned murmurs. How did he survive that? Even B-class students would struggle with that attack. Kale lowered his hand slowly. Sweat rolled down his forehead. But his expression remained calm. For the first time, the academy was seeing something they had never expected. The trash class student was holding his ground against the strongest prodigy. Lucien stared at him silently. Then smiled faintly. So I was right. Because for the first time, the academy began wondering something they had never questioned before. What if the weakest student was never truly weak? The entire arena had fallen into a tense silence. What had started as a simple duel between the academy's strongest prodigy and its weakest student had already turned into something no one present could fully understand. Lucien Draven stood at the center of the battlefield, lightning still crackling around his body like a violent storm that refused to fade. His normally calm expression had changed slightly, not into anger, but into something far rarer for someone like him. Excitement. Across from him, Kale Virion remained standing, breathing slowly, his uniform slightly torn from the earlier attacks. Dust clung to his clothes and the stone floor beneath his feet had been scarred by Lucien's devastating spells. Yet somehow, the trash class student was still standing. And more importantly, he had just deflected an advanced lightning spell that should have crushed any ordinary student instantly. The crowd erupted into confused whispers. Did you see that? He stopped Lucien's spell. That's impossible. Even the professors seated above the arena leaned forward with interest. Because something about that moment felt wrong. Not wrong as in a mistake. Wrong as in impossible. Lucian slowly lowered his hand, the lightning around him fading into faint sparks. He looked at Kale carefully. Not with arrogance. But with curiosity. So you really are hiding something. Kale exhaled quietly. I told you, he said, scratching the back of his neck casually. I'm just getting lucky today. Some students in the stands laughed nervously. But Lucian didn't. Because he had felt it. Just for a brief moment when Kale deflected that lightning spell. Something strange had appeared. A ripple in the mana flow. Dark. Cold. Hungry. Lucian narrowed his eyes slightly. Luck doesn't bend mana. Kale remained silent. The instructor overseeing the duel finally raised his voice. Lucian, if you intend to continue this demonstration, maintain proper control. The warning was clear. The academy allowed duels. But destructive spells capable of injuring spectators were strictly forbidden. Lucian glanced toward the instructor. Then back at Kale. Understood. But his eyes told a different story. Because Lucian had already made his decision. If Kale was hiding something, he would force it out. Lucian slowly lifted both hands. And the atmosphere of the arena changed instantly. The mana in the air began condensing around him. Not in the usual patterns used by academy students. This spell formation was far more complex. Dozens of glowing runic circles appeared around Lucian's body, rotating slowly like massive gears of light. Students in the stands immediately noticed. Wait, that spell formation, isn't that forbidden? One of the professors stood up abruptly. Lucian, stop. But Lucian continued casting. The air above the arena darkened as lightning gathered into a single point. A massive sphere of condensed electricity began forming overhead. It wasn't just a spell. It was a ritual-level technique. Something students were never supposed to use. Lucian's voice echoed quietly through the arena. Heavenfall lightning. The name alone caused panic among the faculty. Because Heavenfall lightning was not a training spell. It was a battlefield annihilation technique developed by royal military mages. If released inside the arena, the entire structure could collapse. Students in the stands began shouting. Is he insane? That'll destroy the barrier. Even the instructor sprinted toward the battlefield. Lucian. Cancel the spell. But Lucian didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on Kale. Show me the truth. The lightning sphere above the arena grew larger. More violent. Electric currents surged wildly through the air, shattering small fragments of stone beneath the pressure. Kale stared upward. His chest tightened. This idiot is serious. The spell was real. If Lucian released it, the arena barrier might not hold. Spectators could get hurt. Students might die. Kale clenched his fists. I can't dodge this. Even if he survived, the explosion would devastate the arena. There was only one way to stop it. But doing that would expose everything. The abyssal core inside his chest stirred violently. The dark energy within him reacted to the massive amount of mana gathering overhead. Hungry. Eager. Waiting. Kale closed his eyes briefly. Guess it's time. When he opened them again, the hesitation was gone. Above him, the lightning sphere reached its final stage. Lucian raised his hand. End this. The spell descended. A massive bolt of divine lightning crashed toward the arena floor. Students screamed. Professors rushed to reinforce the barrier. But before the attack could land, something else erupted. Darkness. Pure, overwhelming darkness. It burst from Kale's body like a tidal wave. The arena floor cracked violently beneath his feet as black energy surged outward in every direction. The descending lightning bolt struck the darkness and vanished. Not blocked. Not deflected. Consumed. The entire arena fell silent. The sky above the battlefield darkened as if night itself had suddenly swallowed the sun. Students stared in horror as the air around Kale twisted with something ancient and terrifying. The abyss had awakened. Black mana swirled around him like a living storm. It didn't behave like normal magic. It devoured everything it touched. Lucien's lightning sphere collapsed instantly as its energy was dragged into the abyss. For the first time since the duel began, Lucien's confident expression cracked. "What is that?" Kale stepped forward slowly. His voice was calm. But the power surrounding him felt monstrous. "You wanted the truth." Another pulse of abyssal energy spread across the arena. The ground trembled violently. Lucien attempted to cast another spell. Lightning gathered around his hands. But the moment the mana left his body, it dissolved. Devoured by the darkness surrounding Kale. Lucien's eyes widened. "My mana, it's disappearing." Kale raised one hand. The abyss responded instantly. A wave of dark energy slammed into Lucien like a hurricane. Boom. The prodigy's body was thrown across the arena floor. He crashed into the barrier wall, his lightning aura shattered completely. Silence. Utter silence. Lucien Draven, the Academy's strongest prodigy, lay defeated. And the one standing above him was the student everyone had mocked for years. The trash class failure. Panic erupted among the professors. "What is that mana? I've never seen anything like it. It's devouring the barrier." The Academy's protective barrier began flickering violently under the pressure of Kale's abyssal aura. Students backed away in fear. Some even fell from their seats trying to escape. Because what they were sensing now was not ordinary magic. It was something far older. Something forbidden. And standing quietly in the middle of the arena was the boy they had bullied for years. Kale Virion. The darkness slowly receded as Kale regained control of his power. But the damage had already been done. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had felt it. The whispers spread through the arena like wildfire. "That's not human magic. Is he some kind of monster?" "No, that's something ancient." High above the battlefield, one man finally stood up. Professor Elric Valen stepped forward. Unlike the other professors, his expression showed no fear. Only understanding. He walked calmly down the arena stairs as the crowd watched in stunned silence. Then he stopped a few meters away from Kale. Elric studied the fading darkness around him. So it finally revealed itself. Kale didn't respond. Elric turned toward the shocked faculty. His voice carried clearly across the arena. "That power belongs to a forgotten category of magic." The professors looked at him. "Professor Valen, you know what this is?" Elric nodded slowly. "Yes." He looked back at Kale. "It is abyssal magic." The name echoed across the arena. Several older professors immediately went pale. Because abyssal magic wasn't just rare. It was a legend. A forbidden power from the ancient wars that nearly destroyed the world. And now, that power stood in front of them. Inside a student. The entire academy realized something terrifying in that moment. The weakest student they had mocked. The trash class failure they had bullied. Had just defeated their greatest prodigy. And worse. He possessed a power capable of devouring magic itself. From that moment on, Kale Virion was no longer the Academy's weakest student. He had become something far more dangerous. The most terrifying existence within its walls. The moment Kale Virion's abyssal power swallowed Lucien Draven's forbidden spell, the entire world of Etherian Magic Academy changed. What had started as a duel had become a revelation. Hundreds of students still stood frozen in the arena stands, their eyes locked on the battlefield where the so-called trash class student had just unleashed a power that devoured magic itself. No one spoke. No one moved. The shattered arena floor still smoked faintly from the clash of lightning and darkness, and the protective barrier surrounding the arena flickered weakly as if it had barely survived the pressure. At the center of it all stood Kale. His breathing had slowed again, the abyssal energy around him gradually retreating back into his body like a tide returning to the ocean. But the silence around him had changed. Before, people had ignored him. Now, they were afraid. Lucian Draven slowly pushed himself up from the ground several meters away, his uniform torn and his lightning aura completely gone. The Academy's greatest prodigy had just lost. Not to an elite rival. Not to a noble heir. But to the very student everyone believed was worthless. Lucian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at Kale in stunned silence. Abyssal magic, the name still echoed in his mind. He had sensed something unusual before the duel began, but what Kale had just displayed went far beyond his expectations. Lucian slowly exhaled. Then, despite the pain in his body, he gave a small laugh. So the rumors were real. Across the arena, the professors had already begun reacting. Several instructors rushed toward the battlefield while others began reinforcing the damaged barrier with emergency spell circles. Students were being ushered away from the stands. Because what had just happened was no longer a simple duel between Academy students. It had become a matter of forbidden magic. High above the arena, members of the Academy Council had already been alerted. And within minutes, the highest authorities of Etherian Magic Academy began gathering inside the Grand Council chamber. The chamber itself was enormous, built from ancient marble pillars and lined with floating magical runes that served as security wards. At the center of the room stood a circular stone table surrounded by 12 seats. Each seat belonged to one of the Academy's ruling elders. Powerful archmages whose authority extended far beyond the Academy walls. Tonight, every seat was occupied. The atmosphere inside the chamber was tense. A projection of the duel played above the table, replaying the moment when Kale's abyssal energy swallowed Lucian's heavenfall lightning. Several council members looked visibly disturbed. One elderly mage slammed his hand on the table. "This is unacceptable." His voice echoed across the chamber. A student wielding abyssal magic inside the Academy grounds. How did this happen? Another council member spoke grimly. Abyssal energy was supposed to be sealed centuries ago. Those techniques were erased from magical history. A third elder narrowed his eyes. Which means the boy either discovered something forbidden, or he is something forbidden. The discussion quickly turned heated. Such power cannot remain inside the Academy. He should be sealed immediately. Expel him before this spreads. Or worse, eliminate him. The words hung heavily in the air. But before the debate could escalate further, another voice calmly entered the conversation. That would be a mistake. All eyes turned toward the entrance of the chamber. Professor Elric Valen had arrived. He walked slowly toward the council table, his silver cloak trailing behind him as the floating projection of Kale's battle flickered above the room. One of the elders frowned. "Professor Valen, this matter concerns the Academy's safety." Elric nodded slightly. "I'm aware." He stopped beside the table and looked up at the projection. "But you are all misunderstanding the situation." Another council member crossed his arms. "Explain." Elric gestured toward the image of Kale standing calmly in the arena. "You see a threat." He paused. "I see a weapon." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Elric continued. "Abyssal magic is not simply forbidden because it is dangerous. It was banned because no one could control it." He tapped the projection lightly. "But that boy just did." Silence filled the chamber. Elric's voice remained calm. If Kale Virion were truly corrupted by abyssal energy, the duel arena would not still exist. Several elders frowned as they considered his words. Because Elric was right. If the abyssal power had been completely unleashed, the Academy might have already been destroyed. One of the elders spoke slowly. "You're suggesting the boy has control." Elric nodded. And more importantly, his eyes sharpened. "He may be the only person in this world who does." Before the council could respond, another magical projection suddenly activated in the chamber. This one did not show the Academy. It showed the outside world. Several red markers blinked across a map of the continent. One of the Academy's intelligence mages stepped forward. "Council members, we just received emergency reports from 3 different regions." The room grew quiet. The mage continued. Strange mana disturbances have been detected across the continent. Images appeared in the projection. Ancient ruins cracking open. Sealed caverns releasing dark mist. Creatures long thought extinct emerging from deep underground. The mage spoke quietly. These energy signatures match the same abyssal pattern we detected during Kael Virion's duel. The implication was obvious. Something had awakened. Not just at the academy, but across the entire world. The eldest council member leaned back slowly in his chair. The seals. Another elder whispered. They're weakening. Elric folded his arms. The boy's awakening may have triggered a reaction within the ancient abyssal network. The room fell silent again. Because every archmage present understood what that meant. Long ago, during the ancient wars, abyssal entities had nearly destroyed civilization. Only a massive global sealing ritual had stopped them. But if those seals were weakening now, the world might be facing the same threat again. Elric finally spoke again. Which brings us back to Kael Virion. He looked directly at the council members. You can imprison him. You can exile him. You can even attempt to kill him. But if the abyss is awakening again, he paused. Then he may be the only weapon capable of stopping it. The council members remained silent. Because none of them had a better answer. Far below the council chamber, Kael sat quietly on a stone bench inside a small isolated room beneath the academy. He had been escorted here shortly after the duel. Not as a prisoner. But not exactly as a student either. The room was quiet. Only a faint magical barrier shimmered around the walls. Kael leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. So this is where I end up. He wasn't angry. Just tired. He had tried to hide his power. Tried to stay invisible. But the duel had forced everything into the open. Now the entire academy knew. Or at least, they knew enough to be afraid. The door to the chamber opened quietly. Professor Elric Valen stepped inside. Kael glanced up. Am I being expelled? Elric chuckled softly. Not exactly. He walked over and leaned against the nearby wall. The council debated several options. Kael raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Sealing me. Exiling me. Or killing me. Elric smiled faintly. You're surprisingly accurate. Kael sighed. But. Elric looked at him seriously. But the world is changing. He explained the mana disturbances. The awakening abyssal energy. The weakening seals. Kael listened quietly. When Elric finished, Kael leaned back slightly. So basically, the apocalypse might be coming. Elric shrugged lightly. Something like that. Kael stared at the floor for a moment. Then laughed quietly. Figures. Elric studied him carefully. Most people would panic hearing that. Kael shook his head. I already knew something like this was coming. He remembered the sealed chamber beneath the academy. The abyssal prison. The moment something inside had noticed him. Kael looked up. So what does the academy want from me? Elric answered immediately. Nothing publicly. Kael blinked. What? Elric smiled. To the outside world, you are still Kael Virion. The academy's trash class student. No rank. No influence. No political value. Kael frowned. And privately? Elric's expression sharpened. Privately, you will become the academy's hidden guardian. Kael stared at him. The monster we unleash when something worse appears. Kael was silent for several seconds. Then he sighed. Sounds like a terrible job. Elric laughed quietly. Yes. But it's also the most important one. The professor turned toward the door. One more thing. Kael looked up. Elric's voice became serious again. You're not the only one who felt it. Something deep beneath this academy has already noticed you. Kael nodded slowly. I know. Later that night, Kael stood alone at the edge of the academy's highest tower. The moon hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sleeping campus. To everyone else, he was still the same student. Still the academy's weakest mage. Still the boy everyone ignored. But beneath that quiet appearance, something far more dangerous had awakened. The abyss inside his chest stirred again. And far below the academy, deep within the ancient prison hidden beneath the ruins, something enormous slowly opened its eyes. The war that once nearly destroyed the world was beginning again. And this time, Kale Virion would stand at its center.